very, very, very little area. I've got one lady who had to live in a cave for years. She was a real survivalist, and she got there and you couldn't pick up a phone, a TV, anything, any electricity. However, she would go outside, and every time a satellite went across every hour, she would get zapped. And that's how sensitive some of these people can be, you see. Now, we hope not to see too many of those because, man, I'm telling you, it'll really drive you crazy. Okay, some areas, here's one up in Nova Scotia, still relatively clean. I thought I'd put that in for those Canadians who probably did a bad job. Here's one in beautiful West Texas where there's nothing but miles and miles and miles and miles. And that seems to be a less polluted area. If we could go on to the next one. Here's our monitor in the Virgin Islands. I've got a patient who is very sensitive. They built a house out on the Virgin Islands. And one day I get this frantic call, Dr. Ray, I have just been doing great for the last 4 years. I'm well, I can do anything I want. And all of a sudden something has come in and I can't tolerate anything. Well, so here's another detective job. So we looked it out, we worked it out. Anybody ever heard of African dust in this room? Okay, the room, the air blows around the world. Look at Chernobyl. Chernobyl radioactivity in upstate New York and Milk and Minnesota and so on, okay, from that. So far we've had a real nice kept secret from the Japan one, but it's already the radiations in California and Washington and Oregon. And so we're going to have that same thing. Well, what happens in the middle of the earth, the winds come from Africa. And what's in West Africa, of course, is that there's a big desert down there, in there. And so you got all the particulates, the bacteria, the viruses and everything. And she was being made ill by that. That comes in from mid-May to mid-September in the eastern part of the United States. It comes up and it goes through Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, and so on. Comes up, hits the Rocky Mountain, bounces off, goes up to New York State, and then into England, and so on. And of course, on the other side, you say, well, you guys are saved in the West Coast, but you got the Gobi Desert coming in from the West Coast, and that hits California and Oregon and Washington and British Columbia. So you got those things that you have to be a little bit concerned about. Know where the wind currents are, what time of year, how often they are in the year, and you can build your houses and build your buildings safely to take this into consideration, okay? Here's a nice place in West Texas. Probably has been burned down now with all our fires. Next slide. So if you can find areas that's difficult to pick up Wi-Fi and TV and things, that's great. You know that TV slide where they say they blanket America 97%, but they figured it covered 100% with the blankets for that. Well, that's what you're up against on these things, okay? Next slide. So areas where grounding is feasible, I don't know, where's our grounding man here? He's probably giving a talk on this much better than I can. But what we've learned is that when you ground, there you go, okay. What we've learned is that most people with electrical sensitivity need to be grounded. And you've got to, it's good for everybody, but particularly these people because they can't function if they don't ground. And so a lot of them have their favorite area. They find out where there's dirt and there's no underground caves or underground wires or iron veins or cables or pipes and things like that that can disturb the electrical imprint of that. And it's interesting, why do we wear shoes? And why do we wear rubber shoes? I look around this place and there's a lot of people with rubber shoes on. And I don't know any baby that's ever been born with shoes on. And I've never seen one. And I'd like to see some because of the fact that there must be a reason for that. And I'm sure you've covered all this on there, so I won't go into this so much. But grounding is extremely important. and the less electrical intake you take, the better off you are, and the less chemical problem, the better off you are that you handle, okay? Okay, next slide. Some of the things, the materials that do decrease the toxic load is that wood, if it's not cedar or pine or terpinaceous ones, you have to really be careful of that because the terpenes can really cause people to have problems. Ground rods at a certain level, and it's varied throughout the United States, or throughout the world, of where you have ground rods. I had one girl, she could not tolerate any of her ground rods. They gave reversed electrical charges if it was not exactly 6 foot in her area. If she went to 5 foot, she would get charges from it. If she went to 7 foot, she would get charges coming in from the earth, you see. So it's individualized and you have to be precise. Certainly on the floors, we like them to be above ground. Those people that have basements, if it's not moldy, do a lot better. But in Texas, we got mostly slabs, or we've got them about that high, nice mold generators, and they're not quite as good for that. Hardwoods are great. Then you have to watch for iron veins in railroad tracks too, because they can conduct into the earth. Okay, next slide. We showed the computers and TVs how you can shield them. The other thing is twisted wires in the walls seem to help. The other thing I like to do is, if we're doing a new building, is not have wiring over the whole room. Just have it on one side, you know, so that you at least can protect against that. And the other thing is, a lot of times, you know, everybody sleeps with their bed against the wall. And if the wall's got any kind of conductor in there, why, it's not so good. So I always have them move out the bed into the middle of the room. And a lot of times that really makes a difference. You know, once you get some meters that really work, you can tell, but I'm not sure about if there's any meter yet that's good. And I'm so glad this group is working on these meters, because we really need that. Right now you've got only one meter, and that's the human sensor, and you have to listen to them, and you know, sometimes their integrators get screwed up a little bit. You can't always tell, you know. Okay, next slide. So hardwood or ceramic floors seem to be the best for the electrical people. And I must say, I was lucky because I was trying to treat the chemical problem. So in our clinic, we have no carpets. And in my opinion, nobody should have a carpet unless they wash it. It's been washed at least 10 times. And the other thing is the wood for the beds. I'll show you what not to do later on. Organic cotton, you can't use wool because the sheep are always dipped. Unless you raise your own sheep, why, you've got a problem with toxicity. But silk, it's hard to kill the silkworms if you use pesticide on it, so they don't have it coming out, although the Chinese manage to mess up all their clean silk right now. It's hard to get in decontaminated silk. Rawhides for springs. Springs seem to be a magnifier, and so that's the other thing that you have to watch out for, although some electrically sensitive people can sleep on them. Okay, next slide. Now, we have, for several years, we used to run a hospital unit for about 20 years, and it got so impossible with all the regulations and all the Obamacare type things and all this that we had to go with the outpatient, which was good for us. So we contracted with the Marriott by us, and they had to have 4 buildings, so we just took one building and made it chemically less polluted. And unfortunately, it wasn't all electrically less polluted because we didn't know about it when we did that. We didn't have the good technology that we have today. So we had some anodized aluminum furniture and steel furniture that obviously conduct electricity, but we use a lot of glass or ceramic, which is fine for those people. Next slide. And the beds should not have springs, and again, you should have wood beds for the electric sensitive people, and got to be sure they're hardwood, not pine or cedar, okay? Next slide. And these are, we've had 20 rooms over there now, and we can get about 80 to 85% to 90% of people well just staying in those rooms. And we have a real problem in that some of our more affluent people won't leave. And I'm telling you, so my bed capacity really is not 20 beds. It may be 10 because I've got people there who've been there for a couple of years. We're right off the freeway, which is not a good place to be, okay? But the point is you can make environments, you've got it within your hands to get people well and keep them well. The key is keep them well without medication, okay? And so that's the other thing. How do you treat people besides the good environment? Well, there are 3 types of less polluted water. One's spring water, one's distilled water, and one's filtered water. Now, the problem with the distilled water is some chemicals spill over right at the same boiling point as regular water. And so a lot of people can't tolerate that. On the other hand, a lot of electrically sensitive people can tolerate distilled water better because there's no minerals in it, okay? Now, the other group is the spring waters with the minerals. It's usually high in magnesium, which is an antidote for the electricity, okay? And so we like to use glass bottled spring water. No plastics because of the phthalates come in and you get a chemical problem. And then some of the filters, charcoal filters and other different kind of filters, ceramic filters, there are some chemicals they won't take out. Certainly organic food with a variety of diet. Varied your diet all the time so that you don't get the same thing. Repetition seems to be a problem in the electrically sensitive and chemically sensitive people. And so if you can have things that are not the same day, you don't have them the same day, you have them every 4 or 5 days, you're much better off. Okay, next slide. And so this is some of the waters from around the world we've evaluated. Number 1 best water is Mountain Valley from Hot Springs, Arkansas. They have a there you go, she's got one right there. They have a 400 acre park above it where they don't spray, and so far the water has not become contaminated, in contrast to Perrier in France, where they got benzene in the water and had horrible trouble cleaning it up. The number 2 water is the Evian water from France and Switzerland, and then the German waters, and then the British waters, and some of the Canadian and Mexican waters are there, and some people do very well on, okay? So that's the other thing. And if you're going to use a distiller, use an all-metal distiller and ceramic. Don't use the plastic distillers because you'll leach off all the stuff, okay? Next slide. The other thing we couldn't live without is about 80% of the people. You can get intradermal neutralization, and you can shift their sensitivity back so they're not so sensitive. And it's a great tool that one can use to overcome a lot of these sensitivities. So we use that also. Next slide. So metals, foods, molds, we would test that way and treat them. Okay? Now, the neurotransmitters all run on electricity, and they are the transmitters that transport the electricity through the body, okay? Glutamate in the receptors is the prime one, although there are 70 other neurotransmitters. I don't know, when the good Lord designed us, he did make it so it's rather difficult to keep your handle on everything, you know? And none of us have a handle on it for that reason. We've got a partial handle on it. And some of the EMF patients, you can't neutralize them. They won't be neutralized for the neurotransmitters. You just have to lower their load and lower their load until they get better, you see. Okay, next one. Of course, nutrition, every patient who's electrically sensitive and chemically sensitive has a nutrition deficiency. The question is, where is it? What organ is it in? Is it in all the organs? Is it in one specifical? And how do you deliver the nutrients to make them work, to get to fit where they're supposed to be so that the body can be robust at all the time? And this is a real problem because what we find in electrical people and also the chemical is that they can't tolerate the nutrients they're supposed to have. So you can measure the nutrients somewhat, but you can't measure them in the end organs. But then to replace them, they got to be able to tolerate the replacement. So a lot of them can't tolerate their replacements, and so a lot of times you have to neutralize them to get them so that they can tolerate that. For example, the source of vitamin C is mainly corn in America, okay? Now 50% of the corn is genetically engineered in America, so you have to be careful of your source of vitamin C. The other people who can't tolerate corn, you have to give them tapioca-derived vitamin C, or beet-derived vitamin C, or potato-derived vitamin C. And so you have some leeway there. Almost all of the B vitamins are made out of yeast or wheat. And so if you got sensitivity to that, you'll have problems with that, and so on down the line. Okay. Now, increased magnesium. Magnesium deficiency seems to be the soothing mineral. And so a lot of patients need magnesium. It's our number one deficit in patients. And so we like to pour the magnesium to them. A lot of people are constipated. That's great. But our goal is we load them with magnesium until they have loose bowel movements, and then back off just a little bit. And that's their dose of magnesium, individualized for everybody. Some can tolerate 200 milligrams, some can tolerate 2,000. And you have to remember that the prime cathartics in this world are methylmagnesia, which is magnesium oxide, which there's a great insulation now that we've used. So I always say to patients, if you're constipated, go to the attic and just eat a little insulation. Or mag sulfate, which is Epsom salts. And so we use it a lot, but we soak them in it and everything. But the others are citrate, and there's aspartate, and there's gluconate, and glycinate, all kind of ones that are tacked on the end that you can try for these people. And then all the other minerals fall in line. You have to supplement it. Some of them, some have deficiencies, some don't. Next slide. Lipids and oils you'll have. And, you know, some people, their GI tract gets screwed up. You have to give it by injection or intravenous for a while until it heals the holes in the kidneys and GI tract. Next one. So here you are. This is just a formula that I give for physicians or anybody. It's tapered for the individual. Okay, next slide. And here are the minerals, some of the different doses, and much on here. You'd be surprised how many people don't chew on bumpers. They get magnesium deficient, and it can just screw up your whole physiology, you know? So I always give them the choice. They can go out and chew on the bumper, or they can go ahead and take some magnesium, a couple of hundred micrograms, and go ahead and do that. Now, the other thing is if you look at the microcirculation, the electromagnetic problem should be called the problem of neurovascular, because the blood vessels carry the oxygen to the nerves, and the nerves regulate the blood vessels. And there are, 4 things about breathing, and everybody talks about the 3 top ones, inspiring air, crossing the membrane, transfer to the tissue. Hardly anybody talks about the fact whether the oxygen is extracted into the tissue. And if you've got an electrical problem, it may screw up your blood vessels, and it cuts off the microcirculation, which is sort of semi-independent of the heart anyway. You have to have the heart pump, but it regulates its own. And so this Professor von Arding, he's the German who invented the Russians' atomic bomb, in contrast to Werner von Braun and some of the Americans, rocket people. And he worked on oxygen the rest of his life because he wanted to do something for humanity. And after the Russians let him loose. And so he worked on the microcirculation and developed this technique, which is very simple and you can give in the homes. You don't have to have the hyperbaric oxygen, which just forces a little bit more oxygen into the blood. We'll go on the next slide. And this just shows what we've got is the old grungy oxygen tanks. And the reason we have that is because the aluminum tanks, the plastic tanks, whatever, are contaminated. And you get chemical contamination with it, and that screws up your microcirculation. So, there you are. We use ceramic masks or aluminum masks, which we had to generate because you couldn't buy them, you know. And then, if you look there, this reservoir that this person has is made out of wood-grade cellophane, not plastic, so that she doesn't get that. And if you go on then to the next slide, it just shows a up close. We'll also use the old mason jars because all the other oxygen equipment are plastic and it'll contaminate your moisturizer when this happens. Okay, next one. So the treatment for electrical sensitivity is lower your total body pollutant load, give your neutralization for hypersensitivity, give your nutrition, safe food, water, and air. And then there are a couple other things that happen. Some people get the gamma globulin deficiencies, and we give them shots of gamma globulin. And we do this all over the country now. And the problem is that the military, anytime there's a skirmish, they buy up all the gamma globulin, and you can't get it. And so you have to wait till they make a lot more and then get it. The other thing is we've developed over the last 17 years an autogenous lymphocytic factor where you actually grow the patient's own lymphocytes. And as they get, it multiplies every generation, about 30 generations. The weak ones die and the strong ones get stronger. And you can fracture that blood and you can boost their T lymphocytes. So we use that, and that's been quite successful also. Okay, next one. Then our ace in the hole is Deborah Singleton, who is our real sensor, because she can see energy like some people in this audience. And some people, I can't even walk into my clinic. I just send them to Deborah first and let her work on them until they can tolerate our clinic. And she can see the energy, and she's got the special talent. I think she's the best in the world, but I haven't seen all of them yet, so who knows. And we've worked together for about 20 years. And she can tell you, like that guy that had the drop attacks we see in yellow, she told me, she drew a picture, and he had a wedge through all 7 layers of energy. And that after he got corrected, that wedge went away. So it was an energy flow problem that we don't understand. So those are the kind of things that we do and on electrical sensitivity. Have you had the next slide, though? So sauna, we like the saunas. The 50% of the patients cannot tolerate the infrared saunas. Most of the electrical patients can't tolerate the sauna. So what we do is crank up the heat, and at the end of the day, shut off the sauna and let them go in there. You have to reteach them to sweat because something has gone wrong with their sweating apparatus, and that won't get the chemicals out unless you get them to sweat. My goal is 20 minutes of profuse sweating a day. You can't give them too much heat because they'll react to that, and that's your other problem. So, and also we use totally wood and glass saunas, no glue, or next slide. These are different types. Next slide. Or ceramic saunas. Don't let them sit on towels so they don't get any of it burned in the wood. Otherwise, the next guy gets chemical coming out. You know how these public saunas are? They all sort of smell, and I got the last guy's stuff coming out of it, or the last year's guy, or the last 2 years' guy, or so on. So, in summary, EMF sensitivity can be diagnosed and treated with difficulty, in my opinion. I used to think a chemical problem was a problem. The difficulty, it's duck soup compared to the electromagnetics, unless they've got a cause that you can do something about. 85% improvement with comprehensive treatment. So thank you very much. Far away, all right?
Thank you very much. Sure. Let's turn down. Thank you. Yeah, hold on just one second. We're just going to get the mic.
Get the mic working.
Checking. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ray. That's Well, it's a lot of information, really. And certainly a lot of us have been working in the industry of dealing with people with multiple chemical sensitivities and environmental sensitivities, and I appreciate the work you've gone into to getting to the point that you have, that you can show this kind of stuff to us, and I know we're really, really grateful. So pretty much everyone's going to have a question, which is great because you've sparked our brains. So bear with us while we go through the questions, and thank you very much.
Dr. Ray, I'd just like to ask if it's possible for us to come and visit. I know I had the opportunity to come and visit you in December, and that was wonderful, and you were kind enough to show us around at the clinic. So I'm sure there are people here that might want that opportunity as well.
We'd be glad to have you, every one of you, but not at the same time.
Okay, raise your hands, folks, and I'll try to get to all of you.
Okay, over there.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Dr. Ray. My question I'm asking on behalf of someone who couldn't be here today. What are the endpoints of this disease, electrical hypersensitivity? In other words, if it goes untreated, many people don't even know that they have an exposure or that there's a relationship, so they may not even be seeking treatment. But do you know that there is a link to cancer and